So how many hours does Trump have to end the war in Ukraine now? And is Trump really going to buy Greenland and annex Canada? This and other topics we will discuss right now. This is our YouTube War and Politics 24. My name is Irina Uzlova and Yuri Rashkin today is with us. Yuri Rashkin is the host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English, communication instructor at the University of Wisconsin and a county supervisor in Rock County, Wisconsin. Yuri, hello, glad to see you so much.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Irina. Let's dig into all the exciting things that have occurred this week. Where shall we begin? I think the press conference seems like the main event, because it really kind of, I think, helped the world focus attention on what is going to be happening after January 20th, when President-elect Donald Trump is going to become President Donald Trump. And right now, and what will be the priorities of this new incoming administration. And I think that it is fair to acknowledge that even though there were a lot of what may seem like sporadic statements about our foreign policy, I think that they really fit into a pretty clear picture and clear vision of the world, in which world is just divided into different spheres of influence. And everybody kind of looks at what's in their neighborhood, and that's what they're in charge of. And that means that those smaller, weaker countries have to figure out with the big country on the block, what are the rules now? Do they get to keep their own country? Do they get to be joining another country? We shall see, because right now there is example of Greenland, there is example of Canada, and in the sense that they will be precedents of what will occur and how different countries will respond to this new kind of pressure from the United States, which is not, this is not the first time, because when President Trump 47 was President Trump 45, the United States was already practicing kind of throwing its weight around and showing what it means when you are the superpower, that you're not just the one who can keep order, but you're the one enforcing the order. You're the one choosing what the order is, because you're the most powerful. Again, we're back to the strength is might. And in this situation, I think the big takeaway is awakening that I'm starting to see in Ukraine. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Irina, but it seems like the press conference pretty clearly stated that priorities of Trump have very little to do with ending the war in Ukraine. Just the fact that Keith Kellogg is delaying his trip alone is already a worrying sign. But there's also no money being planned to spend to continue to help Ukraine. Therefore, the real answer is already there. It's what's going to be happening financially. But what we heard from President-elect Trump about his list of priorities and how long it took him to get to Ukraine, I think, and just the general his vision of the world even, I think was a kind of a shock to Ukrainians and perhaps to other people around the world who were hopeful, who were thinking that now that the election is over, that the rhetoric will tone down. And rhetoric didn't necessarily tone down as much as it has shifted. And it has shifted in a direction that is a little bit kind of explanatory, because Trump has been saying for a long time he wants to have good relations with Vladimir Putin. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean that he thinks that Putin is a wonderful, maybe in my or your understanding person, who is a swell guy, and therefore we just don't understand him. We've been misunderstanding Vladimir Putin. No, I think that's not really why Donald Trump seems to want to have good relationship with Vladimir Putin. It's not because the world misunderstood. It's because the world that doesn't appreciate the strength aspects of Vladimir Putin. His whole mindset is what I think Donald Trump is really indicates that he embraces by wanting to have better relationship with Vladimir Putin. It's that they're kind of like running in the same race. Sometimes there's a Russian expression that two boots a pair. But I think that has been pretty clearly made in terms of priorities expressed by President-elect in his press conference. And I think that it's clearly sent a shockwave around the world, which is important feature of the incoming administration, because as long as we are always feeling a little bit off balance and we feel uncertain, it's easier to manipulate than to direct people or to misdirect people. So we don't know, again, whether Canada is going to become part of the United States seems unlikely right now. But the fact that it is hurting, if not ruining, relationship between the United States and other countries, including our next door neighbor, Canada, our biggest trading partner, is very disappointing. It's very sad. There's no, it's just, it shouldn't be happening. And when we speak about tariffs that we're planning on now to levy on Canada, it's sad because what is that? As we're speaking about, it's a lot of lumber, first of all, and lumber is construction, and that means that cost of housing in the United States is going to increase because cost of new housing in particular is going to increase dramatically, perhaps similarly to whatever the tariffs will be, because that's the building materials. I think people in Ukraine sometimes don't understand. It's a story about the three little pigs, about who had a different house built of what material, and Ukrainians, I think, build houses out of brick, and Americans build houses out of straw. Well, it's not actually straw, it's the 2x4s from Canada. So if we're not going to have that, and how is that going to work? And there isn't, for some reason, this willingness to go through the steps and just think about the consequences, which are going to occur one way or another, whether we plan them, discuss them, or not. And so I guess the takeaway in the end is that it's really nice that sooner than later we have heard a pretty direct statement from incoming president that outlines his priorities. And I think that is really a bit of certainty that we haven't had, because even if these priorities are something that we do not agree with or we dislike or we feel threatened by, at least I think that that's information with which people can start working with. Unfortunately, there's always what I call Trump whisperers, where they feel like they've heard something like, well, he couldn't have possibly said anything that was that bad. No, surely there was some kind of other meaning to it. Let's try. I heard somebody say that the question to which Trump gave a response about 6 months or however long it's going to take to end the war in Ukraine instead of 24 hours, that there was some unclarity about how the question was asked and recorded and caught by microphone, and therefore it is not exactly clear what Trump may have meant. All right, sure. I mean, if people want to take that road, it's their choice. But I think that we should at least thank President-elect Donald Trump for making his priorities clear, which allows the rest of the world to do something about it.
Yuri, it really was my first question about how your feelings about Trump's press conference and what messages surprised you and shocked, but I see that almost all of them. I had a conversation with my colleague, Israeli journalist Zvi Zilber, yesterday, and we decided with Zvi that world divided into two parts, before January 20 and after January 20. But with Zvi, we are waiting for positive changes after inauguration by Donald Trump, but I think that you cannot agree with us, yes?
I think that to me, the metaphor that I use is Cinderella, is the ball as a Cinderella, the ball at Prince's Palace, where everything was wonderful up until midnight. And then the clock struck midnight and things really changed. And the carriage became a pumpkin and the dress didn't look the same, and there was a slipper though, so that's good. But I think that there's different. Even I think people who think that this will benefit them somehow, that Donald Trump coming to power will benefit them. I think the reason that it's being misinformed, because one of the most interesting polls to me in the United States that I think stuck out after the election is that people who paid attention to the news voted for Kamala Harris, and people who were not paying attention to the news voted for Donald Trump. That there was a big disparity in the direction, and I think that some of us are going to be less surprised, and some of us are going to be more surprised by what's going to be happening. But either way, I think even those that think that somehow they're going to be protected don't fully appreciate the extent of the appetites of the current administration. They seem to be getting almost hungrier as they're getting closer to a restaurant, that being White House and power, because their statements about what they're willing to do before election and after election and now there's big gaps and differences, and they're only getting bolder and more daring. And while Donald Trump said that there will be hell if Hamas doesn't surrender hostages, it is also on some level could be possibly limiting actions of Israel more so than they were limited by the Biden administration in effect. So we shall see how all of this works out and how this plays out, and how those that feel that Donald Trump becoming 47th president is going to be in their favor. I wonder how long they will continue to feel this way. I think the number of people benefiting will be shrinking dramatically with as time passes by.
So, Yuri, let's discuss Trump's message step by step. Zelensky commented one of this message on Trump's words about Ukraine in NATO. We should not draw hasty conclusions. President Vladimir Zelensky commented on Donald Trump's words that he understands the feelings of Russian Federation, which opposes Ukraine's accession to NATO. According to him, we should not draw hasty conclusions about Washington's policy in this issue, said our Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Remember, Ukraine was told that Patriot systems can be and are only in NATO countries. Well, either we have been in NATO for a long time, or we shouldn't draw any conclusions, told Zelensky. It was the same with us with Patriot, it was the same with missile systems and with other weapons. Now we need to work and do everything so that Ukraine receives security guarantees worthy of our people, which could stop Putin, Zelensky noted. But is Trump thinking about other powerful security guarantees? How do you think for Ukraine if it is not about joining to NATO?
I think it's important to acknowledge that NATO is at least a two-way street, because there's advantages to joining NATO, and then there's NATO has to fulfill its obligation to its members. I mean, they both have to do something, and I think from a point of view of Ukraine using its ascension to NATO as a negotiation technique in this big scheme of trying to work things out now that American help on the governmental level is soon to be a thing of the past, maybe it makes sense, right, for Ukraine to say, well, if we keep this and this or whatever, and then in exchange, we will not ask to be in NATO. That seems like it's an exchange that doesn't necessarily cost anything in the short term, but it allows Ukraine to have some kind of something to negotiate with. And that's part of what I believe is a policy of the Biden administration, is to leave a lot of leverage to new incoming administration. So if Ukraine, in exchange for a good deal, sends its official desire to join NATO, that by itself doesn't necessarily mean anything short term, although long term it certainly does show that that Ukraine is not following the way that I think most people in Ukraine would want to, because I think most people in Ukraine would like to join NATO, because I think they understand that it is a guarantee of their security, because Putin still has not attacked a NATO country. And that brings us to the second point, which is NATO willing to defend its member states? And right now, under this administration, current administration of President Biden, we see that he brought allies together to help Ukraine, and even Ramstein meetings that have been happening regularly and often over the last several years are showing its strong commitment to Ukraine, to supporting Ukraine up until, as long as Biden's administration is in the White House, which is not exactly what was promised, but I guess that is the reality. What happens after that? If Putin attacks a NATO country, will the United States under President Donald Trump be willing to stand up to that threat, that show of aggression, that show of dominance, and how will this alpha male competition work itself out? We can't predict, because we are not dealing with international agreements anymore at that point, and we'll be dealing with, as was said in one podcast, rule of dawn. It's a rule of law, but it's a rule of dawn. Donald Trump. Not sure if it's the best, but I think you get the point, right? We're leaving laws behind and agreements, and we're going to this personal relationship level of policy, which is very unpredictable. And at that point, does it make sense for a country to be in NATO, where it can be tied, essentially tied up because of the main guarantor of safety being United States not fulfilling its what other members might consider duty according to the contract that is the NATO agreement, right? I mean, that seems pretty logical and pretty straightforward here. So that means that Europe has to, first of all, start looking out for itself. And do so pretty quickly, because at that point, it seems like nuclear deterrence is the only thing that works against being invaded. And in fact, nuclear deterrence may be more effective than NATO, than other alliances, although maybe other alliances will have to emerge to supplant NATO if, again, United States is mostly busy not just with Panama Canal, but attacking, trying to acquire Greenland in a kind of a hostile takeover. Let's not forget that Denmark is part of NATO. So that means that what kind of an alliance is what is the state of the alliance at that point? Putting all of this together, it's like, okay, maybe it's easier to say, you know what, NATO, maybe we can do it without you, and use that as a negotiation technique. Might not be the worst idea for Ukraine.
Talking about Ramstein, really, Lloyd Austin, Minister of Defense of the USA, current minister, will participate in Ramstein. But there are a lot of discussion about the topic: will Biden have time to allocate all the money to support Ukraine? And if it remains, will Trump block it after January 20?
Well, we will find out very soon. But I tend to lean in the direction of expecting that whatever planes are in midair on January 20th at noon will turn around if they're flying to Ukraine with more supplies and will land somewhere else. Because as voters, there was a very clear understanding in the campaign, the election that just ended in the United States, that if you're supporting Kamala Harris, you're for supporting Ukraine. And if you're supporting Donald Trump, you're against supporting supporting financially Ukraine, and you have a lot of questions to Ukraine about how they use the money, and those questions are going to be answered, well, at least looking for answers as soon as the new administration takes over, because clearly they will be looking to find out what happened to all the money that was spent. Elon Musk said as much, and that's going to be another thing that you and I will get to discuss, it looks like, in the next few weeks, because it's going to be such a drastic shift from here's all the help to how did you spend all the help? Now let's talk about that. And I think that this conversation and this discussion about the involvement between the United States and Ukraine might start looking altogether different again in many ways after January 20th. So I think that those people that think that there's some money left, that therefore money left still requires presidential authority, desire to use that money. And we saw that when Donald Trump was president during his first term, that he actually used javelins and sale of javelins that was already approved by Congress, and still tried to negotiate an additional deal with President Zelensky, which led to first impeachment. It is kind of disappointing that it seems like President Zelensky showed in his willingness, in his interview to Lex Friedman, a certain willingness to perhaps reopen these investigations in the future, should that be necessary, needed, helpful. That's disappointing, but at the same time, Ukraine has to have good relations with the United States somehow. And if that's what it's going to take, then, well, I guess it would be nice if there was a line somehow that beyond, well, we'll see.
Yuri, how do you assess Zelensky interview and in general with American podcaster Lex Friedman, and how do you think the main messages aimed at, and were they heard? Based on the results of several days after this interview, are there more pluses or minuses for Ukraine?
That's a good question. I watched big chunks of the interview. I don't know how many people ended up watching 3 hours that the interview lasted. There were several interesting moments, and one of which I feel is important to note, that Lex Friedman is originally from former Soviet Union, similarly to myself. He came over when he was 11. I came over when I was 13. We came with our respective parents, and he actually settled here in Chicago, down the street from me in southern Wisconsin, and ended up building quite a distinguished career in computer sciences, and really seems like a very, very bright individual, which is kind of strange, because when I listened to his questions, they struck me as rather naive, but almost on purpose. And I think that there's a point to being a journalist that doesn't ask hard questions, that asks, that allows other people to, in a way, legitimize themselves and their cause and bring it to a greater public by just asking them very softball questions, letting them go on about whatever it is they want to talk about. It's not quite Tucker Carlson. Because Tucker Carlson has a very clear objective, ideological point of view, and Lex Friedman has a more of a, again, almost naive view where he can invite somebody that makes a lot of sense and somebody who doesn't make a lot of sense. He had Kanye West on. He had let's see, I'm trying to think, on Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Zelensky. So I think on that level, as we kind of put things in perspective, we see that this is a useful mouthpiece for certain audience, and it is clear that that was the audience that was designed for. Because when I looked at reviews, there were I saw that there was very few views on reviews of the interview Zelensky gave, because even though interview itself had over like 2 or 3 million views already. So it seems like should be very popular topic. So if I record a video, then I'm going to get lots of views, but that's not happening. So it tells me that this was for audience of Lex Friedman. And, it's interesting that when they want to promote something, there's a lot of interest to certain specific videos and views. But this was a very specific, how do I say? What am I trying to say here? You see, I don't follow Fox News as closely as one might because I feel like it might be difficult for me to kind of withstand that kind of misinformation. And so, therefore, I don't follow all the vloggers and podcasters that kind of exist in that ecosphere. And so it's quite possible maybe they had a lot of views, but vloggers and bloggers and journalists that I follow did not get much traction on that interview. We already know who Zelensky is. We already know what Ukraine is about. We don't need this justification. But the questions that Lex Friedman asked, Friedman actually praises Trump. I think what Lex Friedman did is Lex Friedman gave opportunity to Zelensky to show himself well to Trump, which was in a way kind of generous because he said, tell us why Donald Trump won this election and kind of explain to us why you think he's so great. To which Zelensky, I think, gave a fine answer explaining that Donald Trump won because he was stronger, which is so true. And he was stronger than Kamala Harris. And I think being stronger is such a wide term because it's like saying he won the game because he scored more points. That is so true. So saying that Donald Trump won by being stronger, I don't think hurts anybody's sensibilities, and it's technically true. So I think that at that point, it's just important, I think, to acknowledge that it would have been more probably advantageous to suck up to incoming president before the election because that's what it was more valuable. But I think that diplomacy requires statements, and I think Zelensky handled his interview well enough. And I think that the impact, there's people who will say that it has and will have impact. That's probably also important to acknowledge, that just to stop on for a second. Will this interview change anything? And I don't think that it will. Because I feel that all that talk about numbers of views and numbers of reviews, it tells me that there's maybe some curiosity, but people that will listen to Donald Trump will listen to Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump is not interested in helping Ukraine, it hardly matters what anybody else says, not just Zelensky. A number of people accept Elon Musk, accept Donald Trump Jr., perhaps accept Vladimir Putin. It really doesn't matter what other people say. So, but it was a good way to continue to doing outreach for this public diplomacy because Ukraine will continue to need bipartisan support. And just the fact that people can individually send money to support Ukrainian armed forces now, people from America, I think, will greater recognize our opportunity and responsibility to help Ukrainians because our government isn't going to be doing it anymore. So it is going to be more and more up to us to decide if we want to donate to support Ukrainian armed forces. And I think those questions are going to arise similarly to where we were right at the beginning of the big-scale invasion in February, March of 2022.
Trump doesn't seem to be like Lukashenko, but he showed a map where the US and Canada are together and wrote, "Oh, Canada." Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responds to Trump, "There is no chances to annex Canada." Is this a joke or Trump's plans about Canada, about buying Greenland, about Panama Canal? All of these messages are true, really?
I think they're true. I think that they're clearly, those are his intentions, and I don't see any reason to doubt them. I don't know that he can afford the price tag. I think that he certainly would like to, maybe for legacy reasons, maybe for imperial reasons, more, who knows why? Because you see, in America, it doesn't even make sense to a lot of people, I think most people, why we would want more territory. Because there's so many different ways of, like Greenland, where we can have access for our military, but it's not actually ours, it belongs to Denmark. So that seems like it's a headache that belongs to Denmark instead of, United States. But if we're looking at this from the point of view of, because of global warming and climate change, however you call it, a big chunk of Greenland is now free of ice. I understand it's like size of state of Massachusetts. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of territory, I guess, in which there could be some different things in the ground that maybe Elon Musk needs or some other people might need. So maybe there's some value to Greenland after all, if from that point of view. But even then, it seems like they could have accessed it differently and worked with Denmark. But either way, I think that to me, it's just a confirmation of how Donald Trump is seeing the world in spheres of influence, and how North America is United States, Central America clearly is as well, but only parts. He wants Canada, but he doesn't want Mexico, and it's kind of I'm not going to say racist, but it's kind of there's a certain something about it, isn't it? Like Mexico, it seems like would be much more interested in being part of the United States than Canada. And in fact, if we have Canada join the United States, it's unclear. Are they going to be one state, or all the provinces are going to be one state with two senators? That hardly seems fair, not to mention that how many Congress people they will need to have. And Canada is far more liberal than the United States. Canada is like a European country. And so that means the United States immediately is going to become a much more left of center, politically speaking, country, because 40 million new voter or population with all the voters. The same, similarly, that if California decides to separate and leave the United States, or leaving everything else aside, then the United States becomes much more solid Republican red country, because California brings a lot of Democrats. So politically speaking, Canada doesn't make any sense. So I think we can sit and discuss how unrealistic each particular statement may be, but I think it sends a message of very big appetites. And how those appetites are going to be satisfied, we're going to find out, but it's going to take leadership. It's going to take leadership from different countries, from leaders of different countries. We saw the president of Mexico took a much more hardline approach to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is now dealing with Canada. So maybe there's something to be said for standing up for yourself, for your country, because that's what is now being understood in this world. This is the world of strength. We left the world of morals. We're rapidly leaving it behind. And on January 20th at noon, it's definitely going to be strength that we understand, and it's going to take a while to understand the strength, because Elon Musk has very high opinion of his abilities to influence the situation all over the world, and so far it is not really at all clear that we have hit the bottom yet.
Okay, we'll see. Yuri, thank you very much today and always. Thank you for joining us. Take care. Thank you.
And thank you, and to all the viewers and brave listeners in Ukraine, and thanks to you for your work.
We will win. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys, for joining us, for watching. My name is Irina Uzlova, and with us today here was Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English, and also communication instructor at the University of Wisconsin and a county supervisor in Rock Country, Wisconsin. See you next week.